Good evening. Let me welcome you to this evening's broadcast on Mango Tree Dialogues, forum where we discuss the issues of the day. I'm very happy that you have been able to join us and look forward to us having a very rewarding, if not very interesting evening. All right. I begin on a light note as we usually do. And the concern this evening is just for me to say, especially, well, certainly to the dads, belated uh, congratulations and a belated celebration of your of Father's Day. That was Sunday, I know, but I just wanted to give you a shout out. We recognize the contribution of fathers and mothers to the building up of human civilization. And we know that it is particularly difficult in these days. I can't think of any time really when it is not difficult to be a parent. I guess from the dawn of human civilization, it has not been an easy proposition. But nonetheless, we as dads, we soldier on, trying the best to bring security and stability to our families, and certainly to have the ability to provide for them. And it, as I said, it can be very difficult, but I can tell you as a dad myself that it is very rewarding. It's very rewarding, especially when you have children who live up to certain principles and they grow up and they begin to play their part in the building, the continued building of human civilization. So it's a very good thing. And we remember our dads. And this evening, I want to give you all a shout out. And if your dad has died, I'm sure that he has left memories that you would want to continue to cherish. And do that and remember him in a very special way. All right, what's on my mind this evening? The whole question of the American elections. And that is something that is going to preoccupy our minds as we, between now and November, we're almost into just 5 months before the elections are held. And, there are people who have characterized this as being one of the most important, if not the determining, the definitive election, American presidential election in our lifetime. Well, they said the same thing was said last time, but I really do believe that with what is at stake in this election, it can easily qualify to being one of the most, if not the most important election that we have had in our living memories. And that for a number of reasons. Later on in the program, I have a guest who will be discussing this matter with me, the whole question of the democratic messaging going into these elections. And I will wait until we get to that segment and we will talk about that. But one of the things that has happened, I think sometimes last week, is that the Republican Party presumptive nominee, presumptive because it doesn't happen until it happens, is going to be Mr. Donald Trump, the former President Donald Trump. And last week he had a return visit, as it were, to Washington. Some people are describing this as a return to the scene of the crime, because You remember that on the 6th of January in 2024, he led that rebellion. Well, not saying led, but he facilitated it, egged it on, urged it on, for the a mob to assault the Capitol building and to prevent the counting of the electoral votes that Biden had won and that had been certified by the states. And so he returning this time, I said 2024, 2020 was the election. Let me correct myself. And he returning this time, he seemed to have returned to the Republican bosom with a kind of flourish and his usual flamboyance. But what was very interesting about it is the way in which he was received by the members of the Republican Party in the Congress. The very same people, some of whom had castigated him, spoken eloquently against him, people such as the Senate leader, McConnell, because he had said that, in a way that Trump was responsible for what had taken place. There are others who had signed off on not wanting to vote for him in the Senate, about 10 of them in the Senate, and almost 140 or so in the House of Representatives, who had voted no against the count and of the electoral college votes. And that was very pathetic. And to see him, as it were, returning to the scene of the crime, and to return with such flourish and triumph, as if he did nothing wrong, was something that, rubbed many Americans the wrong way and should be a cause of concern, frankly, for all Americans. But of course, we know that in the divided country that America has become, we're not going to find that kind of unanimity of revulsion against Trump's behavior. But while Trump was down there, he had a meeting with some businessmen, the top echelons of the business class. A business meeting where he tried to talk about policy. And let me just quickly say that some of these businessmen, I think the Microsoft person was there, the Chase was represented, and these are the top leaders of these companies. Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, and other big companies, big hedge funds, billions that manage billions and billions of dollars. They were in attendance. And there are some who show some sympathy towards Trump. You see, one has to understand the business class. Because of the top 100 business companies and business leaders in America, they're giving support. They seem to be wanting to give support, let me put it that way, to Trump. As a matter of fact, quite a few of them in the hedge funds, as I said, that manage billions of dollars, have been lining up and cozying up to Trump in giving him support, monetary support, going into the elections. Let me just quickly say that one of the things that is in urgent need of reform is campaign money going into election campaigns. I know the politicians have been talking about this from as long back as one can think, but nothing meaningful has been done because big money that can buy votes, that can buy advertising space, that can influence an election in certain directions is flowing in. As a matter of fact, I would prophesy that this election, on both sides, you're going to find the biggest rolling of dollars that has ever been in any presidential election. I make that prediction. Because when I see what is lining up and how seriously certain members of the business class take this election, even though quite a number of them criticized Trump's meanderings in the meeting, his incoherence, his lack of understanding of policy. Because Trump really never had anything much to say to them. Trump doesn't have the kind of mind that can analyze and understand serious policy. But I guess they gave him a hearing because, quite apart from the fact that many of them support him, but some probably went just to hear what he had to say. But by and large, the business class in this country, Wall Street, where the various indices, the Dow and the S&P and the Nasdaq, they are making record-breaking runs on the exchanges. Record-breaking. And this is this is not something that Biden is being given credit for. We probably look at some of this later on, as I said. But he doesn't get the credit that, boy, the stock market is as the highest it has ever been in the past 50 years in this country. That there are people, the big companies, the Magnificent Seven, Microsoft, Tesla, Meta, Nvidia, these kind of companies, Google. As a matter of fact, three of them that I know of, Apple is one of those two. Microsoft, Apple, and Nvidia are trillion-dollar companies. Trillion-dollar, can you imagine? One company having a capital basis of $1 trillion. As a matter of fact, I think Microsoft is 3 trillion, and Nvidia now, the AI darling of the day, is in the 3 trillion. As a matter of fact, just this week, it overtook Microsoft as having the biggest, as being the number one company with the biggest capitalization. So when you talk about money and influence, this year is going to be quite something to behold. And Trump sees that. Trump sees that, so he's trying to enlist them as much as possible on his side. And one of the things that I find very interesting about this sort of friends is that probably not interesting, but really disconcerting, very troubling, is that these companies, many of these companies that support Trump and are prepared to send him dollars and have vowed, especially the big hedge fund managers. As I said, there are some of them that handle $1 trillion of capital. One hedge fund doing that, one company being over $1 trillion. most countries having more money than at least 50, 60 countries in the world. One company, Microsoft, for example, has a bigger capitalization than perhaps 50 to 60 countries in the world. That's what they're dealing with. So that's a lot of money, a lot of dough to roll in. And what I find in their very disconcerting in their support of Trump is that one, they don't seem to understand the kind of person that Trump is. Or if they do, they're being disingenuous in not recognizing the danger that he poses to the country. For them, the question is just the bottom line. People on Wall Street, it is an enterprise of the greedy. And they don't care too much whether regulations are knocked out of the way. The big oil companies, they couldn't care less if the regulations are pushed out of the way, as Trump has promised. Drill, baby, drill. And they don't worry about the climate change. That's not their concern. They're not concerned that their grandchildren and grandchildren, especially the grandchildren, are going to grow up in a world where they're going to be like fried chicken. Because every single year, the climate gets hotter and hotter. This year is hotter than last year, and you can't bet that next year is going to be hotter than this year because of fossil fuels. And the whole question of how we are treating the environment. So these environmental safeguards that have been put in place, and Trump promising to deregulate as he tried in the first term, and to drill unconscionably, is setting up the country for a very, and not just the country, but the world itself. And that is why the world has to be concerned. I keep saying on this program that what happens in America distinctly affects the rest of the world, and we have to be concerned. That's why the world is concerned, because as America goes, in a real sense, so goes the rest of the world. We might not like to hear that, but it is a fact. And when they cozy up to Trump, and they're prepared to suspend their best judgments because they want their bottom lines to swell, they want more money than they can ever handle in a lifetime flowing into their pockets. They have no conscience about what Trump may do or will do in order to guarantee them that flow of what I would call, in that sense, filthy lucre. That's what we're dealing with. But I want to say a word to these business people. They might not hear my voice, but insofar as they may hear it, let me say this. Because they're going for a Trump has promised a politics of retribution and revenge. You see, they're concerned about the money and what Trump will do economically to boost their bottom line. But they're not looking on the other side of who Trump is. They're not even hearing that the man is promising to be an authoritarian. They're not looking at his demeanor. They're not looking at who he is now, having gone through a criminal trial and found guilty, and how angry he is, and how when he talks about retribution and revenge, that he means it. You know, many of them just brush it aside and say, oh, that's just Trump being Trump. Oh, he will never do that. Oh, we have safeguards. We have guardrails in which that can be used to check him. Really? We saw what happened in the first term. The way in which he kicked aside guardrails. And he was very cautious then because it was just a dry run. He didn't know a lot of things. He still doesn't know a lot of things, but he wasn't as brutal in his assessment of things. And certainly, he didn't come out and tell people that he's going to do. Can you imagine a man running for president of this country and he comes and tells you that he's going to carry out revenge against perceived enemies? Is this what the business class is lying up behind? That he's going to, those who have hurt him, and this has been a mantra for him his whole life. He said it in his book, one of his books, that, you know, you come after me, I'm gonna go after you. And he has lived like that. And if he wasn't confident that he could get in, he wouldn't be saying these things openly and publicly so that everybody could hear him. And you can't say, well, you didn't hear. And would he be wrong that if he got into power, that he would have a right? Because if he's elected, he's gonna telling you these things up front. You can't say you didn't hear them. And so when he starts to execute policies of revenge and retribution, and you say, boy, a president shouldn't do that, he'll tell you, I told you so. Don't say I didn't say it. You see, one of the things about autocrats, you know, they tend to tell you things that are outrageous, and you think that, no, that could never happen. Oh, that could never happen in America. Oh, that is not who we are. No, that is not America. It would never happen. And so, you know, they say outrageous things for you to think that, boy, that could never be on the agenda. So you just brush that aside, you know, just push that aside, and you vote him in. And then when he gets in now, he tells you that you remember I said it? you remember I promised that? Wouldn't he be in his right to see that as part of his mandate? Because it's part of why you vote him in, because you heard all these things, everything that a politician tells you that he's gonna do. You better take him at his word, because if he gets in to exercise power and he starts to do these things, you can't come now and say, boy, no, it shouldn't happen. But the warning I would make to these businessmen, quite apart from the fact that when Trump starts to break down the regulations and so on, he's going to be putting the whole world in a way in greater jeopardy. I may even start military exercises, who knows? Quite apart from all those things, they ought to be very concerned that with all the dollars that are flowing into them, are they prepared, or will they be willing to live in a country where there is mayhem, where there is instability? When Trump starts to round up the 20 million people that he has promised to round up and build concentration camps and put them inside there, oh, he's just saying that. But when he starts to do that, when he starts to use the Justice Department and pressure the Justice Department to conform to his wishes of revenge against those whom he believes have done him wrong, when perhaps the troops are sent out on the streets, and you may think that I'm fear-mongering and I'm just chatting hot air. But for me, you know, it is as plain as day that when all this instability is taking place, one thing I know, if there is a rudimentary thing about economics, a basic economic fact, is that no country's economy can be strong and viable in an environment of chaos, instability, and mayhem. So let the problem start, and that Dow that is at 40,000, in no time, boom, 20,000. And all kinds of things go haywire because nothing is being done. An economy has to be run orderly. So when the economy is tanking and your profit margins are tanking and you can't do business, and perhaps you have to be living like caged animals in your gated communities, or try to find some SpaceX flight to Mars. I want to know how you're gonna live. So you're looking at one side, the money coming in, but look at the man on the other side, what he's promising to do. And you must ask a question whether that is something that you are prepared to be satisfied with. You notice I'm not even talking about patriotism, because patriotism doesn't mean anything to people who think like that. Love for country doesn't mean anything for people who think in such greedy fashion. As I said before, it is just an enterprise of the greedy. And they don't care about love of country, because if they love their country, they won't be lining up again behind somebody who is going to bring the country into disrepute, not just nationally, but internationally. They will not be lining up behind somebody who promises you a policy of retribution and revenge. They won't be lining up behind somebody who is only concerned about himself and his own self-interests, who is deeply self-absorbed, who is transactional to the core. By transactional, I mean he does something for you and you do something for me. Trump doesn't do anything that he doesn't expect something from. That is how he has always lived too. That is what his business life has been. You hurt me, then I'm gonna come back at you. No time for forgiveness. Don't even talk about that, because I don't do wrong. And it's transactional. It's all about a deal. Remember, he talked about the art of the deal. In I think that was one of his first books. Not written by him, of course. I think Schwartzman was the ghostwriter of that book, as I understand it. I don't know to what extent. Anyway, let me back off of that. But there are critical questions that not only the business class, but I'm speaking especially them this evening. Critical questions that they must ask themselves. And they must know whether they're going to be prepared to allow, whether they love the country or not, but they're living in it. And yes, they have a good way, because they have their money, they can skip off anytime in their jets and so on. But you can skip off, but skip off and leave what? Skip off and live what kind of life? Anywhere else? And these are questions that I would put to them, and questions, things that they will have to answer. But I'm gonna leave it there, and when we come back, I'm gonna talk about it's gonna be our feature time, and so we're gonna have the interview with my guest, and on the whole question of the democratic messaging going into the presidential elections in November. All right, so we will be back in a moment. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, my brothers and sisters. In this segment, we're going to have what I know will be a very interesting discussion on the topic. Brian is no stranger to you by this.
Mhm.
He was here with me on our first program when we discussed the Republican Party and its threat to America. And he's joining me this evening to talk about the Democratic Party and the direction, of that party in terms of its messaging and what might be the flaws in the message that is being sent out there, what needs to be done, and whether they're on the right track towards winning an election. Uh, Given what the polls are saying, the some polls, I must tell you that I'm not a huge believer in polls, but I know that they are a snapshot in time. They capture a few things at a particular time, but sometimes I don't capture these things very correctly either. And so I'm not a huge believer in polls that tell you that Trump is so much ahead, or that he's cutting into the black community, and he's amassing voters there, and all this kind of nonsense. I call it nonsensical. I mean, if you go by what he did last weekend in that black church in New York. Uh, but quite outside of that, the Democrats have a big problem of understanding how to package a message. I mean, the economy is roaring. Like I said earlier, the stock market is at the highest ever. It has to be because there is stability in the economy, and that the incumbent president or the government is doing something right. Unemployment is low. The right out there in the wider society. But despite the low unemployment and inflation stabilizing, because it seems to have stabilized, although interest rates are still high, and we will watch to see what the Federal Reserve, Jerome, does at some point. Some people think they will have about two cuts in this year. And so, things are kind of difficult for a number of people. You go to the supermarket, things are still high. I think there's a lot of price gouging going on that the
Mhm.
party probably needs to look at.
Yep.
But the rentals are high, and generally in the lower middle class, there's a kind of malaise, a feeling of malaise, where people think that they're not feeling all this macro thing that the party is talking about. So there's a lot of things that they need to put together and package, and to get a message out there that we are ready and that we can do it. All right, so to discuss this with me, Brian has joined me, and I'd just like to
Mhm.
invite him to just say his piece and
Yeah,
say what's on your mind with regard to the messaging of the party at
yeah.
this point.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me again. It's
Pleasure.
always a pleasure doing this with you, and having these deep dives into some of these issues that we see here in our country. I agree with you. I agree that the messaging is not penetrating the base, as they call it, right?
Mhm.
I heard a statistic, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that pretty much illustrated that something like 27 to 35% of people in this country believe we're in a recession right now,
Oh, wow.
right? And what's crazy about that is all of the data shows the polar opposite. You
Mhm.
know, the some of the world banks have come out and said the only strong economy right now is the United States. Post-pandemic, we're the only country that is, essentially um, reinforcing people in the workforce by bringing people back into the workforce.
Mhm.
Um, and the problem that you see is that the folks that are in the Democratic Party are not demonstrating that they are living in the same world everybody else is living in. Okay. And I don't mean that as a particular criticism in a general sense, because when you think about the fact, like you mentioned, you go to the grocery and you see eggs is a certain amount of money and bread is a certain amount of money. Yeah, you might think, wow, like, just a few years ago, it wasn't that high. I often think of a time when my brother and I went car shopping just not too long ago. This is probably a year or two ago, right after the pandemic. And there was this enormous sense of price gouging, right? You walked into the dealership,
Yeah.
everything was just way out of control in pricing. You're talking about pickup trucks at 130, 140K, you know. And the first thing they would say to you is, "Oh, it's a shortage. There's a shortage."
Mhm.
You know, I think what a lot of these corporations realized is that there's a select few demographic of people that are willing to pay these prices because that supposed recession or that inflation pricing does not affect them because they have the disposable income, you
Yeah.
know. And I think, unfortunately, the marketing that a lot of these folks on the left side of the conversation, they market to those folks. They're talking to those folks because a lot of those folks are donors. They have deep pockets, they have income, and they have various sources of income coming in to keep their coffers flush. Whereas Joe Middleman, who's working two, three, four, five jobs, and doing side gigs, they're working in the gig economy as Uber drivers. They're not feeling that love. They're not feeling that this economy is working for them because they feel like they're struggling, day in and day out. So when you watch a lot of the mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, those folks, they're going to tell you, hey, the market is great. Economy is booming. Inflation is stabilized, like the same metrics you've mentioned. But when I look in my pocket and I log into my bank account online, I don't see that. I don't feel that. So I think it's incumbent upon these folks to, like you said, create a narrative, or not so much as create a narrative, show people,
Mhm.
hey, this is how we've made life better and how life will be better should you decide to give us another term in office. Okay. When you take it a step further and think about women's rights in this country, okay, the GOP and the Republican Party are determined to pass a abortion ban in this country. It took
Right.
them 50 years. Okay, they played the long game. To their credit, they waited. They were like, "Oh no, we'll get there. We'll get it." And they got it. And now it's like we're almost there. We're almost at the finish line. All we have to do is win in November. That's it. Okay. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party, they're not really pushing the issue as hard as they could, and saying, hey, we need you at the polls. We need you here. Here is the proof. I was listening to you earlier about some of the concepts of, Trump and the way he talks and how these corporations will respond to, him being in office, right? And like you mentioned, these folks are telling you what
Mhm.
they're going to do. They literally wrote a book with what is it, Project 2025?
2025.
Yeah, like they
Nine
literally
hundred,
wrote it
nine
down.
hundred and odd pages.
Yeah,
Up, up.
so if you could create this manifest that outlines your vision of America for the next 4 years, which is built on vitriol and vim and making sure that all your political enemies are, retribution is cast down upon them. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, it's, hey, we're better than the other guys. Like to me, that's not an effective message. Okay. These folks have found a way to fuel their base, okay, to mobilize their base. And they mobilize them in two ways. Physically, okay, and we
Mhm.
saw that on January 6th. Okay,
Mhm.
and we see that at all these rallies. Okay, this man, had white folks in a black church. Okay, all right. The messaging there is clear. Okay, and the backdrop to that was a cross that was glowing, that it almost looked like it was burning. Right, when you really look at the symbolism in those pictures, when you see it, that's number one. And number two, financially. Okay, this man could go on to a rally stage and talk about batteries and sharks and ramble through ad nauseum about God knows what,
And they
and they
clap.
open their checkbooks
Yeah.
and they just, here you go, here's more money. They're buying his stock, they're buying his sneakers. These folks are complaining that the economy sucks and that how, Biden is terrible on the economy and we're in a recession, but they're wearing $1,000 worth of Trump paraphernalia, you know. They're buying flags, they're getting custom flags printed. They are traveling across the country. It must be very expensive to either fly across the country to every rally or take the train maybe or drive, with gas prices in the summertime are usually higher. They're not thinking about those things. Why? Because the messaging is so clear, you know. So the
And
Democrats have a lot of work to do.
and why do you think that with the number of issues
Hmm.
that the Democrats have to run on?
Yep.
Because in my view, there has never been perhaps a time, in at least in my memory,
Hmm.
and I'm up there in age,
Yeah, that
where a political party has a set of solid
yeah.
issues to
Like,
win an election,
yeah,
and
yeah,
the Democrats have.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like they're just snatching what they say, victory out of the
Pulling defeat out of the hands of victory.
defeat.
Yeah, I've used that term many times to describe this party. Yeah,
It's
you know,
amazing because, so how do they structure a message and to whom do they go
you
to
know,
get the word out there? Because I remember Biden started off about Bidenomics. I
yep,
saw that that was bombing. He backed off that.
yeah,
Very quickly, to thank God he did that, because people don't care about any philosophical economic principle if they're feeling it a certain way. And like you rightly said, there's no reason that they should be feeling it the way that they are saying,
yeah,
at least the ones that are complaining.
yeah.
You know,
I,
I
I,
I heard about a story about some folks, I'm not gonna even say which profession they're from. They got, when Biden gave the $10,000 reprieve,
mhm.
of the student
Student
loans,
loans. Yeah.
and they got theirs, and they said they're still voting against Biden.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had someone tell me that over the phone maybe about 6 months ago, and they says, "Oh yeah, no, I'm still gonna vote for Trump," and I thought to myself, yeah, I get it, because here's the thing, what it boils down to is I think the Democrats are focusing their conversations on policy.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And what you find with the MAGA base and with Trump and his ilk, they're not talking about
They're not
policy.
about policy.
Okay.
No
They're
way.
talking about how you feel.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And there's power in that. Okay.
Yes.
Look at the Tea Party movement a few years
Mhm.
back.
Mhm.
Okay. What did they say? Oh, it boiled down to another theme here, immigration, right? Oh, they're coming in here and taking your job.
Oh, yes.
Okay, there was no data that showed this was true. Okay, don't get me wrong. Outsourcing has devastated the middle
Yes.
class in
And
this country.
globalization. Yeah.
Okay, by generationally bad. That's how bad that issue is.
Mhm.
Bringing jobs back to America, repatriating these jobs is going to take literally
Right.
100 years. Okay, because corporations figured out, wait a minute, I can do more with less. I could pay, you open up a sweatshop somewhere in in
I know.
in in Asia somewhere and pay people pennies on the dollar and get the same device made, and then I could charge 300% markup on it and make a
Mhm.
profit. Versus if I have to pay someone a livable wage here in America,
Mhm.
and then pay them health insurance and pay them benefits and all this other good stuff that is to be honest with you, what every person, a self-actualized person should be able to gain
Hmm.
from, having a job in America. They're like, we don't want that because it's just cheaper to do it over there. Um, so I think what the folks on the right have is a messaging of how you feel. When he
Hmm.
ran in 2016, it was about what is it? What did he call them? The forgotten man. That's
Right.
what he said, okay? The forgotten man. When Democrats start talking about policy, it sounds like you're talking down to some people because
Right.
I'm not smart enough to understand it because I'm not a college educated dot 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 dot. You see? So he goes over to these rallies and he says, "Let's talk about sharks and batteries and I make you laugh. Vote for me." I'm the guy that makes you laugh. And at the end
That's
of the
how
day,
man,
I
yeah.
hate the same people you hate. So, it's all good. That's what he's good at. He's good at marketing. And
Yes.
he has a message that resonates with people because it's built on hate, first and foremost. That's its foundation. And then on top of that, it's how you feel today. Okay. I feel like no one sees me because, I'm a white male and I feel that, my birth rates are low and I'm angry because the borders are open and therefore I'm just going to vote. I'm just going to tear the system down, right? That's the feeling, it's not true. All right. And then what's worst about it all, it's all encapsulated in mendacity. Okay.
Right.
This man has figured out a way to say anything he wants and
Anything.
people believe him. Okay.
Mhm. That's it.
The Department of Justice is coming after you. Oh, do you do bank fraud? I didn't realize that you create bad business records. No, I don't do any of those things. So why would the DOJ be coming after you? Because Trump said they're coming after me. He's standing in the way of the Department of Justice, you
Hmm.
know. Now, when you think about what the Democrats are saying, they're out there saying, here's the facts, here's the data. But again, these folks are not folks that are reading things. They're going based on a feeling, and that's
So
it.
you're talking about a wall there that has been set up.
Yeah.
How do the Democrats what can they come up with to penetrate that wall?
You
To
know, it's
prove to
it's
that.
gonna it definitely has to it comes down to our young people, I believe.
Hmm.
I really believe it comes down to the folks who are coming into voting age this year, before the election. Um, I think the messaging has to start with, you know, some form of realism. You have to find a way to show folks that, yes, here's my vision of the country. Okay. And my vision of the country, yes, it includes everyone. That's a problem for the right. It is. Inclusivity, diversity, they're not hearing it. Okay. They don't want to hear it.
Hmm.
But the folks who are coming up now not only need to hear about the programs and policies that will benefit their lives, not just today, but 15 years from now, right? But also they have to be the ones that penetrate into the community and tell their peers, hey, look, this affects us too. There is a willful ignorance when it comes to voting and people showing up at the polls, right? Um, I've said it. I've done it where I've lived in a blue state. Oh, it doesn't matter. I live in a blue state. It's gonna go blue. But the problem with that thought process is that, if enough people do that, you'll see that the voter turnout is going to be substantially low, and someone who's on the alternate side might utilize the low turnout to actually get what they want, which is the office, right? So I think what we have to get back to on the left, or even in the middle, you have to find independents too. I myself, I'm an independent, right?
Yes.
We
Yeah.
have to create that coalition like we saw in '08,
Hmm.
right? The dream of a better life. Like, hey, look, everyone's gonna do better. And when everybody does better, from the low, I hate the term low class and lower class. I hate the classes, but
Hmm.
that socioeconomic bracket, when they do better as a whole, the country does better. That includes, women, it includes minority groups, it includes and going up further, it includes small businesses. It includes, you have to show folks. You can't just say things and not necessarily have any foundational action behind it, and a prime example of this, I apologize for going a little long here,
That's
but
all right.
prime example of this is the Build Back Better message,
Yes.
the messaging and the policy. Okay. The messaging was fantastic. Like, yeah, we just came out of a pandemic. We
Hmm.
have to get back on track. This guy just screwed the response on the pandemic. A million people in America died. He came on TV and said, I don't take responsibility for anything. Go drink bleach. Go, ingest ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and all this stuff. And he just pretty much washed his hands and went home, right? And then when he was done with that, he incited an insurrection. Okay. But Biden came out and said, well, look, this was like one of the darkest moments in our country's history,
Hmm.
right? Do you, we are on the brink of complete disarray from the pandemic, right? Post-pandemic, and now someone challenging our historical norms in this country and everything that makes us, who America is supposed to be on the world stage. Okay. So the Build Back Better messaging resonated with a lot of people. It was like, wow, yeah, we need to get back on our feet. America is known that when we get knocked down or we stumble, we get back on our feet. But what ended up happening was the translation into policy, it didn't formalize. Why? Because you had folks who were too worried about keeping their donors happy. So the
Right.
infrastructure bill passed because all the donors wanted that because they want that federal funding, right? But the actual Build Back Better, which included things like student loan John Lewis Act,
Hmm.
the restoration or solidification of voting rights, things like that got left by the wayside, and they never really went back to it. They never tried hard enough to get it, because they had Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema say, "No, we don't want that,"
Right.
and that was it, and that's where it stayed, and that's where it's been. The Green New Deal, you
And
know.
that
So
included the Family Act as well. The family.
yeah. So
Well,
so it comes back to, like you said, the messaging where you have to uh what's the term I'm looking for? You have to essentially show people, yes, we are willing to fight for this.
hmm.
Tooth and nail, okay? The GOP waited 50 years to get Roe overturned. We're willing to wait and we're willing to fight and we're willing to bring this to a vote every day,
Hmm.
okay, and call you out on your BS every day,
Yes.
politically, publicly. No, you're wrong. This is what it is. And it gets to a point where you hear it so often that you'll say, oh no, these guys are actually fighting for us, not just the political donors, and I think that's really where it starts, is breaking through that that block of, oh, they just want our votes, they really won't. And that's the problem they have with the Black community right now.
Right.
They feel
Right.
like they've been taken advantage of for 200 years. You know what I mean? Oh, you want my vote, you're going to come look for me when you want my vote. Once you get it, you're in the wind,
And
so
you
in
really
terms of
can't blame
people.
them.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I don't, like, because if every 4 years you come knocking at my door and then I don't see you for another four, after a while I'm gonna feel like, okay, well, this person is taking advantage of me, and this is something that you're hearing now more than ever. Okay, and this is why he's running around the country with gang members, all right, and selling sneakers and go into black churches to pander to black folks because he sees us in a monolith. You see that we're not, oh yeah, come over here because they're not doing anything for you, so you might as well vote for me.
Right.
And I don't think much of you. At least that. So
You said something significant. You've said a lot of significant
yeah,
things. One of those that I really caught was that people vote their feelings,
absolutely.
right? And that is where Trump has been very instrumental in getting to get people to feel
Yeah,
that he's concerned about them.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and I think you the Democrats, and I don't think it can be left to Biden alone. That's
no,
another problem they have. They seem to
no.
think that he, as a man of 81, and that's
Hmm.
another question too. You
Hmm.
know, he can go around the country and convince people.
Yeah.
The Democrats need to come up. The DNC
Hmm.
needs to come up with a set of surrogates that they're going to use out there with
And you
a
have them.
cohesive and coherent message,
Yeah,
and not just stay in the cities, but
yeah,
they need to be going south and into the rural areas and
absolutely.
letting people know that
Yeah,
yes, don't try to hide and say, boy, look what we're doing, and the
yeah.
economy is going, and the stock market is flying through the skies,
Yeah,
and
these
all
folks, these
good
folks
things
are
are
not
happening.
invested in the stock market.
That's
You
it.
know,
They're not vested in
they're
that.
not invested in the stock market. That's the whole thing. It's like you're going to talk to me about something that traditionally and historically I have not had access to for multiple reasons, but predominantly I don't know anything about it. You know what I mean? The system
Right.
is built to take money from me and not give, like, not help
E-
me grow my money.
Exactly. Or like you said, you come across as a kind of liberal elite. Oh,
Yeah,
the infrastructure thing was passed by partition. Oh, the
mhm,
CHIPS Act and all these other things. Yes, all
yeah,
of those things are good for the economy.
yeah,
And but they need to explain to people that these things are gonna take time to permeate through the economy to benefit you
yeah,
in the short and in the long term,
yeah.
right?
I'm
But
reminded of two sayings, right? The first one is um, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line, right? And what that comes from is, Democrats feel that they need to really like 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 connect with their political person. Oh,
exactly.
they need to feel it. They need to feel like, oh yeah, no, I love this guy. I could see myself getting a beer with this guy on a Sunday afternoon,
Because
right?
from day one they set themselves out as the missionaries to the poor,
Exactly.
right?
Whereas
And
Republicans, they're just like, you vote, you toe the party line. I
right
don't care
and
what this guy says. Okay, Mitch McConnell, perfect example. Mitch McConnell, January 7th, went on the Senate floor and essentially called Trump out and said,
Mhm.
this guy is responsible for this insurrection. Okay. Fast forward 3.5 years. Hey,
Mhm.
Mitch, who are you voting for? I'm supporting Donald Trump.
He's shaking his hand.
Yeah. So it's like,
so
again,
so
they fall in line. That's
so what the Democrats need right
it.
now is a Clinton moment where they say to people,
Mhm.
convey to people that I feel your pain.
Yes.
And Biden is going to be the one to have to say that, but he's
Yeah.
not saying that enough. You have to communicate, and he's such an empathetic person. That is
He
what
is.
surprises me.
It's
But he's
amazing.
so caught up in so many other things. But you have to say to people, since it is a feeling thing, because people are going to they punish the incumbent that makes them feel bad,
Yeah.
right? So you got to communicate to them that listen, things are working out for the better.
Yeah.
Yes, I know that the CHIPS Act and all these things are not going to chip in right now to really make you feel better, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
Just bear with me.
The funny thing about it is you can't find a better person to convey empathy and to
Dan Biden,
convey compassion than Joe Biden. Okay.
none.
This man has
His
gone
second is
through,
not there.
huh?
His second has not been made.
No, no, no. And the thing that's crazy is when you look at his history on a personal standpoint, his political history does have some sketchiness in it. Don't get me wrong. He's not perfect. But when he lost his wife,
Mm.
and then he lost his son, and then now he's going through the situation with his with Hunter, like sometimes you watch some of his interviews and you can actually see the turmoil permeating through this man as he thinks about
Oh yes. Oh
what
yes.
it is he wants to convey.
He
But,
wears on his body.
unfortunately, he's a president out of time, right? Not, and I don't mean that in a sense, it's a double entendre there, but like he is a president that would have thrived at a different point in history, right?
Hmm.
Obama's the same way. I think Obama's presidency, right? Um, as amazing as it was, may have been too early, you know, because he would have been what the country needed to get unified, like now, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
After, let's
yeah.
say, a Trump, like, oh no, like Obama, an Obama style coalition is what you need today. The second quote I was going to mention to you was going back to Jack Kennedy, where he says, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Right? There is a situation here in America where we think about what have you done for me lately?
Hmm.
That that mindset, right? That mindset. What have you done for me lately? Um, and the problem is that ultimately what it boils down to is a lot of folks will look at the political spectrum and just think about be one or two topic voters, which is fine, but they'll wait till like November or right before the election to
Right.
really
October.
get engaged. All right, what's going on? you know. Meanwhile, like the house is on fire. There's no running water at the hydrant. Oh, and then now you're tuned in, like, okay, how can I help now? Like, oh, it might be too late. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
So they have to really hit the road running.
now,
And
yes.
right now, and
And that's where the messaging matters because, like,
they don't have a lot of time.
if you
Um,
can't get people to go to their local school board elections, much less to the local, county clerk elections, let's say,
yeah,
then
not to mention those.
it's too late. It's too late. So that's where that motivational message needs to start at the most grassroots, you know.
Right. We're running out of time now,
I
but I
apologize.
need to ask you, what do you make of the age factor
You
as
know,
as a communicative message? How can he use the age factor to his advantage?
experience, honestly.
Hmm.
I find the age discussion kind of grotesque and macabre, honestly. Um, we we go through our lives constantly looking at the clock, right? How much time do I have left? And I think in the presidential standpoint, yes, you have to be a certain age to become president, right? But does that mean you need to put a limit on how old you can be to also, to be like a candidate for president, right? Um, However, in this day and age, I feel that we look for so many different things to discriminate against people. Age is one of those.
Oh,
Now some folks will say, well, Brian, that doesn't make sense because if you're at a certain age and you're not of your faculties, how can you run the country? You know, but Biden in the first 4 years has not shown anything that I know of that he's not prepared for the job, right? Number two, this guy knows the Senate, how the Senate works, and how the House works, and how all the levers of government can be moved and churned because he's been in it for more than 30 years. So
mhm.
even if he can't come out and, let's say, communicate the clearest because he suffers with stuttering,
Oh
he's
yeah,
going to
it happened.
find the right people around him. Okay. Trump came out and said, I know the best people, right? 40 out of the 44 people that was the best people have all been indicted or have been sent to jail. Okay. So that says a lot, right? Meanwhile, Biden has a good cabinet around him. They're not perfect, but they know what they need to do to get the job done right. Okay. And he's probably thinking of a succession plan too. Because let's face it, at some point or another, he's gonna like, listen, I gotta hang this up. I'm getting tired. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And I think that's just human nature. So I really feel like, yes, you can be of a certain age and do the job. If the spirit is willing and the body is willing, okay, and you have the right cabinet around you, I don't have a problem with that because at the end of the day, he knows and he understands the buck stops with him. That's why he's going to have the right people around him, you know. Um, they don't talk about that in any other field. Like, oh, look at Jack Welch with GE. This guy was in his 70s. And they weren't saying, "Oh, hey, man, listen, you gotta pack it up soon." Like, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. It is just that to push back a little.
Yes,
It is just that the presidency
yeah.
is not like any other field.
It's true, but then think of it this way. Trump is 78 now. He just had a birthday.
Yeah, well,
Okay, so he's
that's the
what, three
point.
years younger? And let's take it one step further.
Okay.
I haven't heard Biden on stage talking about sharks and batteries
Oh
and
no.
and what was it? The late great Hannibal Lecter. Like what? You
Right.
know,
Or Ronnie Johnson.
Ronnie Johnson, and let's take a cognitive test and all this other stuff. Like the
I
man
only
was on stage
raise
and
I only raise the age factor
yeah,
because it is a consideration in if you go with the polls, which like I said, I don't
yeah,
do those things as such. A good 60-70% of people who are canvassed,
yeah,
have deep concern about his age.
yeah, yeah,
And I raise it just to say that if so many are concerned about it, he can spin the age factor to his advantage.
absolutely.
On many of the lines that you have been saying there.
Mhm.
So, but you get the impression, not so much from Biden because he's spoken to it and joked about it at different times
Yeah,
because he knows it is out there.
yeah,
But you get the impression from the party in general that there is a studied uh, sense of wanting not to speak about it.
yeah.
But I think if so many people are concerned about
You
it,
have to
confront
embrace
it
it.
and use it and say,
Yeah,
listen, when I look on the other side of the danger that is coming to this country,
yeah,
the other side gets elected. I want to be here
mhm.
as a force of stability to do it one last time
Yeah.
to save this country.
Like Jordan coming back. Yeah,
Right. So don't skirt around it. Use it
yeah,
to your advantage. I am well, as you can see, look how we traveled to Europe and came back and went back to
yeah,
Europe, back down in Hollywood and doing all these things. The man is doing at 81 what
yeah,
probably would just blow
yeah,
apart
yeah.
some 35-year-old,
You,
40-year-old.
you know, and
And
to tag on
but
to that too,
use it to your advantage.
to add to that, I think it's incumbent on the media to actually, practice journalism, right?
Exactly,
So when
exactly.
when when the debates
They're a
occur,
big part of the problem.
yeah, yeah, because when the debate they give this guy free airtime, millions of dollars of free airtime, right? So when the debates happen, they need to be not just asking random stupid questions about, oh, what do you think about this and how would you do? They need to be a little bit more intentional and say, here's an example of
What
an
we
issue. Okay. How, like, it needs to be like? It needs to be like a job interview, right? It needs to
Mhm.
be, how would you handle this situation? And I need details, right? Now, it needs to be on a level where, yes, if the threat comes in, I'm going to hand it off to Lloyd Austin and show your work, okay? Because
Right.
if you do that, what's going to happen on the other side? He's going to talk about, well, they'd never do that because they know that I'm Trump and blah 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 blah. This bloviating that he does. Meanwhile, there's
Yeah.
nothing behind it. Whereas if you have someone like Biden that says, "Oh, well, no, I have a cabinet behind me. I'm just one man, but the presidency, I'm the face of the presidency, sure,
Right.
but my cabinet is
And he
really the
does a good
ones.
job leading the team.
Yes, and
Yeah,
you
he has
build you,
demonstrated
and
that.
that's what good leaders do.
Exactly.
They build up their team and they say, "Hey, no, this is the team." Now, again, you may not agree with their politics, you may not agree with who they are, but guess what? They are the best at their jobs. They're at the top of their game. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be in the room. And you need to show that.
Right. There's another factor, but of course we're out of time
Oh, sorry about
as it
that.
is because I wanted us to look at the Kamala factor.
Yeah,
But we will hold that perhaps for another discussion
yeah,
because you hear all kind of stories there as well.
yeah.
Before I give you the last word, the when I see Trump talking about speaking to his base and everything is based to his base.
Hmm.
I said, well, he doesn't even realize that he's shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah.
Because the more that he concentrates on the bases, the less time he has to even penetrate other constituents.
Mhm.
And the base is with you already.
Yeah.
So I go there every day quoting, but I shouldn't be giving them advice. They can
Yeah.
listen to this program and get some advice. I won't go down there, but for us,
Yeah.
he's shooting himself in the foot and he doesn't even realize it.
Yeah.
Because if I had that level of support already, I'm gonna break out from you and go somewhere else and see what else I
Because
can
I
find.
and I
But he
think
doesn't have the capacity to do that because the independents and the blacks that he's courting now, uh, they're not put up with his the kind of person that he is,
yeah.
kind of So I don't see him breaking outside of the base in any significant way. And if he doesn't, there's no way. If people
Yeah.
really go out to vote, even as much as they did the last time for Biden,
Yeah.
game over.
Yeah. I actually think there's people in his base that aren't going to vote for him. They like the persona.
Or vote against him.
They'll vote against him. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's maybe people might think I'm crazy for saying this, but I think there is a subset of people in his base. They're like, no, I love to
that
hear the guy talk, but I'm not going to vote for him.
or that he thinks is in his base.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Yeah.
thinks that they think is in his base. He's gonna
Yeah.
get a surprise.
Yeah, they'll put on them. And you know what I think what he's shown is that a lot of these folks need to feel connection to something. Again, it's about the feelings, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
I want to say and do certain things, and I want to feel that I'm protected by my inalienable rights of freedom of speech and things of that
Right.
nature. I don't want to share my office with someone who's trans or of another religion. They want to say those things, they want to feel those things. And I think you have a really strong point of his base will never change, right? It'll
That
be
time
the 100 million people or
can't change
77
because
million people.
they need him just as much as he needs them.
Yeah.
So there's no
But
change. So
the problem with it is that if he tries to broaden that base, he then alienates the people who were originally in his base.
oh yeah,
Okay. So it's like, oh, if you want to go out and go to like the log cabin Republicans who are predominantly, LGBTQ members of the LGBTQ
right,
community, folks in his base today might say, well, what are you doing? Why are you talking to these folks? It's supposed this is the club for us.
right.
You
So
know,
he has to
you know.
so he has to keep feeding them the red meat.
So he has to feed them the red meat,
All right,
and just to show you when it comes down to the situation with courting African Americans, it's like you go to an African American church, your congregation was predominantly white, and then the next day or the day or a few hours later, you go and do a speech with Charlie Kirk. So if anyone's paying attention, they'd say, well, wait a minute. Charlie Kirk is the one who said that Martin Luther King is a horrible person. He's the one that said that he doesn't feel comfortable getting on an airplane if the pilot is African American. This is like, so how can you be courting my community and then giving this guy airtime? So he does have to figure out. or you're absolutely right. He does have
and,
a problem
and
where
he can't figure it out. He
he
doesn't have the
because it's a
sense.
it's a box, right?
Yeah,
It's like I have these 70 or 80 million people that I know will vote for me.
yeah,
But if I try to get 80 million in one, I then piss off all the 80 million.
right.
So I have to keep coming on stage and like I said, bloviating this nonsense to keep them engaged. Meanwhile, on the backside of it, he's talking to these business leaders because he
Yeah,
needs donors,
yeah.
right?
He needs
So
money.
he's going to say to them, "Hey, how can we use these folks to generate money to keep
He
me,
needs he
you know?"
needs money to run the election, and
Yeah,
he needs more
yeah.
to pay his bills, his legal.
Unfortunately, that's what they are. They're a piggy bank for this guy. And
Yes.
again, a lot of folks might disagree with me. There is a small semblance in my heart for, a compassion for some of these folks
Oh
because they
yes.
are hardworking people, but they've been grifted,
If you're
and
human at all, man, you have to.
they bought into the con. And it's like, when the fever finally breaks, they're going to be like, oh my God, like,
Where
how
were
could
we?
I? It's like when you were a kid and you dated someone and then you're older now and you look back and like how could I have dated that person? Like how could I, there's
Or why did I break off from that person?
yeah, because your mental state at the time, it seemed like a
Yeah.
good idea, it's no excuse for the hate and the racism and all of that. I
Yes.
definitely will differ from that. But when you see folks like throwing their hard-earned savings into his stock, knowing fully well he's gonna rug pull these folks and they're gonna lose their shirts, and then what? What are you gonna do? Keep giving him money? Like,
Mhm.
man literally has a gold toilet where he lives.
Oh yes.
How could you possibly say that he lives your life? Meanwhile, you're complaining that bread is $5 for a loaf of bread.
Yes.
He doesn't even know the cost of bread. Like, I mean, it's unfortunate. That's the
Yeah,
way.
it's quite an interesting thing forward. Was that your last word, or you want to
Yeah,
add?
yeah. I want to give it back to you. I do apologize. I
No, no,
kind of
that's all right. That's why we're here. We want to distill the issue so that people can see
yeah,
another perspective.
yeah.
You won't get this kind of discussion on some of the newsrooms
No, definitely not.
because people have their own agenda, I guess.
Mhm.
But I'd like to thank you for joining me again, Brian.
Always a pleasure.
I know we're going to be doing this more and more and more as we
Yes.
get to the election because the key is to really give people another sense
Yeah.
of another set of viewpoints
Yeah.
other than what they're hearing out there. And
And they got to hear it from regular people like them too, like you can't
exactly,
the
that is
pundits that you
precisely
see
it.
on TV, they're paid,
Yeah,
they're backed by big sponsors.
and really, as the criticisms go, they're all part of the liberal elite.
They're part of the
And,
elite. Yeah.
and that is why they don't say things as they ought to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. They play a middle
So,
ground.
and those like Ahmedi Hassan, for example, who dare to go against the grain
Yeah.
and gets put out under pressure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
thank God he's bouncing back in his own way.
Yeah.
So, my brother, thank you very much for joining me, and
Thank you for having me.
do it again.
Yes, of course.
All right, and we're just gonna close out now, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening and under the mango tree for this interesting dialogue that we just had. And I'd just like to wish for you a very good night and take care of yourselves until next time. We'll be here on Thursday again, where we will be discussing Jamaican and diasporan uh, uh, affairs. The diaspora conference is taking place in Jamaica, so it's a very interesting time. So on Thursday, we'll look at issues relating to the whole Jamaican situation. So thanks again for joining me, and take care of yourselves. Walk good.